The Smith-Morra Gambit, which is e4, c5, starts out with white sacrificing a pawn on d4, allowing the pawn to take it. Pawn takes pawn. Now the Smith-Morra Accepted now is pushing this pawn, giving up a pawn for quick development. Now what's normal is pawn takes pawn, and white wants to develop, so he gives up a pawn, but he's trying to get his pieces out very quickly. At this point, black could probably play d6 or other moves, but in most cases the knight comes out to c6, developing his knight. White wants to develop his other knight, so knight to f3, and wants to control the center. And black's got ideas of pushing his knight to f6 or pushing to d6 and perhaps pinning the knight with the bishop to g4, or black can try to fianchetto's bishop with g6, get the bishop to g7, the knight out, and castle kingside. He's up a pawn. White wants to still continue development, so the bishop c4 is good, aiming for that pawn on f7, if for example, if he can get knight to g5 or something like that. At this point, it would be obvious that if black plays bishop g7, white's going to play knight to g5, and there's a big threat on this f7 pawn with this. Black would probably have to play knight to e5, attacking that bishop and protecting the f7 pawn real quickly, and white would probably retreat the bishop to e2. So with the bishop to c4 and bishop d7 looks pretty good, black's also got the alternative of playing knight to a5, attacking the bishop right away. Now you'd want to protect it or move the bishop or find some other counterplay. Normally you would see something like queen d4, looking at protecting the bishop and attacking the rook at the same time, in which black would probably follow up with nf6. So queen d4 could be played, and then if nf6, push the pawn on e5 with this, the knight will probably go, or the knight can attack the queen. Queen then can move to a safer square such as that at h4. But in this case, if we look at this, and the knight takes the bishop, white wants to now sacrifice this bishop with this move. Bishop takes f7, check, only move is the king to take that bishop. So now white's got several ideas. One of the ideas is playing knight to g5 check. Well, the king's got to return to something like the e8. Otherwise, if something like moving the king to g7 would fail to knight to e6, forking king and queen, and black would lose the queen. So that would be a move. Or white could play queen to d4, aiming for that rook on h8. That's another idea with this. Black would develop his knight f6 to protect it and threaten the queen. So that's another point that he can play. Queen then can play to d5, e6 to get out of check, knight to g5, king gets out of the way, queen e5 attacking the rook with this, knight f6 is played, and it's pretty well held. However, in this game with this, it's Kurtz and Berta, Hungary 1958, white played queen to d4 right away with this, threatening the rook on h8, and black made the wrong move, trying to protect the rook. What should have occurred was to put the knight at f6 so that the queen cannot take that rook, and if white tries to push the knight after pushing e5, black can play knight h5, white can play knight to g5 check, king goes back to king to e8, queen probably will try to go to d5 looking for mate there at f7, then black can play e6 to stop it. You can't take the knight because the queen's on it with this, so the queen goes to queen to f3, threatening the queen to f7 mate. But now queen played to b6, and king's got a escape route so that he can get out of check if that occurs. White can attack the knight on h5, the knight on rim is dim, he can play g4. Black can counterplay with bishop to c5, and after the queen f7 check, king d8 will probably result into a draw. Nothing happens after that. But the losing move that black played was bishop to g7, thinking this is normal and he's attacking the queen. White ignores moving the queen. He could have played something like e5, but then black plays knight c6 attacking the queen. The queen can check at queen c4, and that would be played. Another idea is playing queen to d3, getting out of the harm's way of the bishop on g7. Black will play d6, so he can develop. If there's a check, king to f8, knight to g5. With this is okay for black. He survives this. He can play knight to h6, so he's not mated at the f7 square with this. And white can probably castle, be safe that way. So with this, the better move is knight to g5 check. So the king's only got two moves. If you go to king to e8, for example, queen to g7, now we're attacking the rook and also threatening mate. So d6 is an escape route, but black loses his rook and the rest of the game is easy. Even if king goes to d7, queen gets more material with h7 and the game is over. So if we go back to our other choice with this, king goes to f8. Well, white could try queen to d5 again, threatening that queen to f7 mate with this. But black can play bishop to c3 check, pawn takes pawn, play queen to e8 and stopping the check, and white really doesn't have much. He can grab the knight with this, queen takes at e5 with this, black can kick back the knight with h6, and it's slightly good for white, but not winning. So the winning move is knight e6, king e8 instead of the other moves. Now we play queen to g7, pawn takes knight, queen takes rook, and the game is over. There's too much loss of material. Queen is threatening to take at f7, king can go to f7 with this, queen can take the pawn, king can try to hide, keep the knight, and then white puts more pressure on with bishop h6. So this is a good trap for white in the Smith-Morra Accepted.